Good evening, everyone, and welcome to IKYA Live.
The wealthy world is aging fast. In 1950, around 1 in every 12 people in high-income countries was over 65. By 2050, it's expected to be more like 1 in 4. And it's storing up a big problem.
It is a feat that we can live longer and that we can enjoy being alive for longer, but it's expensive.
When people retire, they start to cost society more money, and the costs will soon be unsustainable.
What's becoming increasingly clear is that the three-stage model of life, where you educate, you work, you retire, is fundamentally broken.
Current approaches to care for the elderly are a massive drain on society's resources.
If you look at it from an economical perspective, we are spending too much money on doing the wrong things.
And these mistakes cost more than just money.
I don't feel that the older population are valued. I think we may be an inconvenience.
So how can societies provide high quality but affordable care for their growing elderly populations, both today and into the future?
And welcome to IKYA Live again. My name is Andy. I'm Operations Manager here at IKYA Center in Oslo, Norway. And IKYA Live is world news from the spiritual perspective and your premier news program for practical spiritual advice in your everyday life. As The Economist just highlighted for us, the world's population is aging rapidly. Of course, it's happening more quickly in the Western and more developed countries, but actually the global South and developing countries are catching up at a really accelerated pace and may actually meet us in this sort of elder boom that is taking over the world's demographics. As the world ages, we have lots of different challenges ahead of us. Now, since the new year, we've been covering a series of news topics that are leading us to tonight's look at how to deal with aging. We're going to be looking at everything from the pros and advantages of a longer life, as was highlighted, but also the costs, the challenges, as well as ageism and many other aspects of this change in our global trends. So remember that IKYA Live is a news discussion. It's for you to come with your questions and also your perspectives, any concerns you might have. So please be sure to write them in the chat below. And we also have a live studio audience who will be asking questions. In addition, before we get started, down below, please like tonight's episode and be sure to share it with your friends, family, and fellow spiritual seekers because they can still join live all evening or follow the episode in repeat afterwards. So, we made a kind of bold statement tonight that old has become the new young. So, IKYA, what does that actually mean and what is the situation really looking like on the ground?
Well, it means that young people are worthless and should be euthanized immediately. It's not so difficult as one will have it. When we look at human history, like whenever there are changes, we look at them from the perspective of what we understand now, right? And we look at this wave of old people and what to do with them, instead of seeing that we are in a change of the human journey. Now, what we're seeing now, this century is a weird century because everything is shifting and changing, preparing the human journey to be better and for humans to become more intelligent and to find balance. And part of that is that we're getting older. Now, if we just look at how evolution works and also how consciousness works, when you have a life form in a low consciousness, it makes no sense for it to live long, right? Because you go about doing your things and then you have kids and then you die, right? There's very little development. So, what happens when consciousness grows? The human journey becomes more interesting. And as we connect to ourselves spiritually, the longer we live, the more interesting it gets. And for most people, even today, the last half of their lifetime is the more interesting one, right? That's when you start connecting to yourself, when you start connecting to what life is about, you get better balance, you get a better understanding, you zoom out, you get less self-absorbed, you contribute more to life around you, right? So in that extension of the human journey and having the potential of gradually becoming wiser, it is interesting, right? And that is not a problem. It will be a problem for a while, but over time, what we will see is that we will have fewer humans. And because of the population decline, as we talked about, it will be quite normal for kids to be born artificially, right? That the woman will not be carrying her child. That will be done outside of the human body. So babies will be basically produced, and that will be the normal thing. So it means a population can be controlled in a much better way. So we'll have fewer humans and they will live longer. The thing also that we live in a society right now where we are obsessed with productivity and consumerism. So the whole obsession with young people really started after the Second World War, right? That's when consumerism and the big corporations really took off. And the reason for this is, of course, that older people, they have already established their preferences, their life. They need less stuff. So they're not as easily persuaded when it comes to marketing and to buy stuff they don't need, right? Because as you get older, you have pieces of clothing that are probably older than your kids, right? And it's just how it is. Young people, they just want everything. So they started marketing, creating that kind of segment of consumerism. And remember, like when we are young, we are supposed to be selfish. We're supposed to think we know it all. Because from an evolutionary point of view, we are supposed to go out there into the world and test our DNA. Think of the human life form, not as the true life form. The DNA is the true life form. And it wants to survive, it wants to procreate. And evolution means that we all have to fight it out and figure out who's got the better DNA for survival. So you're supposed to believe in yourself, go out there, fight, slay, do whatever. And the ones who survive will procreate. That will get, we will get to then a kind of stronger life form over time. So young people are supposed to be selfish. They're supposed to believe in themselves. They're supposed to go out there. And that is what is so important in consumerism, right? To kind of harness that and to stimulate that. Young people really don't care about the environment. They say they do, but they want to change the world, right? When you want to change the world, it's because you're arrogant, because you don't understand how things work. So you start out from the notion that I've understood how things work. They should be like that. And you're supposed to have that thought. And then you go out there and try to fight for your brilliant ideas. And over time, you'll find out, oh, all right, it's not that easy. But maybe we're onto something still. And maybe you then are kind of part in bringing the life form and the civilization forward, right? So, but because young people can then be formed and shaped into consumers, and you can build brand loyalty and all of that. After the Second World War, we became obsessed with young people. And that basically bled over to society at large, where being young became a skill. It's not a skill, right? As an adult, when you look back at yourself as a teenager and a young adult, it should make you cringe, you know? That's when you have done it correctly. The human journey, hopefully you get smarter, you understand more, and looking at your younger self is not something you necessarily want to share with anyone. So, you know, being young is not a skill. It doesn't make you better, it doesn't make you more intelligent. But because the corporations want to reach young people, how the young people think, you know, how they operate is very important to be able to build a stronger brand loyalty among young people so they carry it with them as they get older. Right? So corporations became obsessed with young people for that reason. And again, we've started to look at being young as a skill, as an intelligence. And what is also interesting about this, when you see it systemically, okay, young people are more brutal, more selfish. They don't care about consequences. They have, they're not as evolved when it comes to risk assessment because they're not supposed to, right? Think of all the chances you took as a young person, right? Especially young males. They're idiots, and they're supposed to be because they're supposed to take risks. And if it doesn't work out, they're supposed to die. Throughout human evolution, human history, males have always died, right? If you're not strong enough, you are supposed to die as a male. That's been the rule. You go out there as a warrior, you know, as a soldier, as a hunter, as like always doing something difficult and life-threatening. And if you survive well, then you're good enough to represent your species, and then you will have kids with as many females as you possibly can. So that's kind of been the rule, right? So young men are supposed to be idiots and believe in themselves. So risk assessment is not a good thing. So when we then worship that way of behaving, that mindset, right? Because normally you would have older people guiding the young ones. They're like, okay, I appreciate your energy, but, you know, we have experience. You also need to do this or this or this. So normally in the background, you would have older people then using the vigor of the younger generation and making them kind of like pull society forward. But now what we've done is put young people also into leadership positions, right? So it's the ones who do not understand risk, who don't care, who are extremely selfish. After the Second World War, they started to take over. Look at corporations. Now, in the old days, after the Industrial Revolution, when you look at the rich families, they always had a sense of responsibility. They were kind of building society, right? They took a lot of responsibility, and that was part of their pride. It was part of their identity to build a better world for everyone. After the Second World War, that changed, because now also younger and younger people became leaders and executives and had more and more power and influence. So get that mindset. And what we have today is a civilization that is driven by the most egotistical, the most greedy, no risk assessment. They don't care about anything, and they're just like, whatever happens, as long as I can make money. It's all that belongs to the young. So when we removed the older generation from being in power, we ended up with this, and it's not going well, is it? Right? Young people don't care because they just want what they want, and they have no idea. They can protest and they can do this or that, but they're supposed to believe in themselves and just do stupid shit. And if you survive, you can procreate. So we have this very strange situation going on right now. And the antidote is what's happening right now. Nature has a way of balancing itself out. now we'll have a wave of older people, right? Because we're running out of young people. So the balance will shift. And what is interesting about it is that instead of older people being pushed out of the workforce, they will now be invited to stay. Just watch what will happen over the next 10 years. One will realize that being young is not a skill. It doesn't make you smarter. When you have someone who've been building their competence and their skill over maybe 40 years, maybe they know something, right? It's not like they all of a sudden lose everything because they've got wrinkles, right? Because they have lived. Experience is not a disadvantage, right? That is what you get as you become an adult and as you get older. And experience has been considered a disadvantage. Young people are more easily fooled, which means corporations can get away with absolutely anything. Look, something shiny, ooh, we'll buy it. It's toxic, well, what's that? Who cares anyway, right? It's that. As you get older, you're less gullible, right? So for corporations, it's been important to not give older people more power and influence, because then they would not be able to do what they're doing, right? But life always has a plan. And what's happening right now, very slowly, is that older people will become more powerful simply because they exist. And that whole journey will change our civilization for the better. But right now, we have this idea of older people being worthless and they cost money. Not seeing that, we have the most valuable resource. One thing that's really funny to me, when it comes to AI and robots, who can you more easily replace? Someone with experience or someone with productivity knowledge, right? Young people can do stuff, but they don't have experience. They don't have the wisdom. So, who can be replaced more easily? Right? So basically, over time, experience will be valued. Insight will be valued. Because as you get older, what's happening in your brain is that it will gradually zoom out. Throughout our whole lives, we build maps. Our brain is obsessed with building maps, and it will combine all information, all experience, and it will build. And as you get older, you will have to zoom out to see the whole thing. So we start understanding more of kind of the fabric of life. You understand more of what is actually important, right? And why it is important. And you start seeing, right, that thing that I used to believe, what a moron I used to be, because you can understand how things work. That will become valuable. Because the solution to the problems we have in our world today cannot be solved by young people with a college degree. It's too complex, it's too difficult. It takes people with the ability to think and to analyze and to not be too engaged in their own bullshit. So that will become a thing. And then you have robots and AI can pretty much do the rest. So we'll see over time now, over the next couple of generations, you will see gradual power shift, where being older becomes more interesting. And there are many reasons for this. Remember that getting old will not be a thing anymore. We still now have kind of the wave coming now will be the last wave of people who really get old. And we'll get back to that in a little while. We have a comment or question?
Yeah, we have our first comment on YouTube. Where they share, from my perspective, today old people are in general outdated and not able to adapt to fast-changing society, while the young generation don't know anything and they are also totally busy feeling offended about everything. And that for me, it triggers for me also an observation. Even within my lifetime, I've observed that sort of decline of older people having the respect of everyone around them, and being the ones with the wisdom and stuff. And it has made me wonder too, is it related in some way to the rapid development of technology? Because basically until let's say the Industrial Revolution or World War II, technology evolved rather slowly, so that older people could be the ones still with the top skill set, and young people would slowly learn things as apprentices and that kind of thing. But it seems like after World War II, maybe technology has just increased so quickly that I've noticed old people struggling to kind of keep up with it and keep themselves up to date. Is there anything to that?
Oh, absolutely. Now, when we're talking about all, it's important that you look at the development of this civilization in the kind of longer lines, and look at where we were 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Now, the Second World War was a big shift. After that, we simply become dumber and dumber and dumber, right? So we get older but dumber. And the reason for this is that we stopped teaching people how to think. Having education, if we go back 100, 200 years, having education meant that you would learn how to think. Philosophy would be very important. Everything they understood as science would be very important to kind of form our ability to think and relate to the world. So you had that kind of tapestry in your mind. So when you learned something, you had kind of that contextual understanding of it. Because knowledge is not wisdom, and knowledge cannot be turned into wisdom. Now, one way to explain wisdom is to have a different layer. It's the contextual understanding of knowledge. Now, that comes from building your map, right? If you think you're building a tapestry of all your experiences and understanding how the world works and what is really important in all of that, and your values and what it means to be alive, right? When you have that as a backdrop, and then you have knowledge. When you learn something, you can place that into that contextual understanding, and that's wisdom. We deliberately, as a civilization, chose to not teach that anymore. Why? Because we wanted people to be production units and consumers, which means they had to buy into that and know nothing about how the world works truly. Because then they depend on all their products and they cannot connect to what the world is really about, what life is truly about, because that doesn't mean anything anymore. Right? So we removed philosophy. We removed, now even in schools, kids hardly learn history. Right? Because we're removing the contextual understanding of knowledge, so that you know something and then nothing, and you need someone, a supervisor, to tell you how to use that knowledge. You need something outside of you to interpret you and your knowledge, to apply it in the right way. In that way, we're becoming dumber. We have more information, but we're lacking the contextual understanding. And we have removed it from education. We have removed that from the public discourse. We never talk about systemic issues, the more principal issues or values anymore, right? That's just a political talking point, but we really never go there. So now we have a generation of simply really dumb old people, right, who were groomed into becoming self-centered consumers and be kind of specialized in their way of thinking, not understanding anything about the world. So that will over time go away, because as we need older people to stay in the workforce, we have to inspire people, young people and adults today, to prepare for a life where they have to work until they're maybe 85. Retirement will gradually not be a thing because society can't afford it. And if you want to work, you need to be relevant, which means we have to prepare for a world where we constantly educate ourselves. So having education while we're young, sure, that will last you for about 5 years, and then you will have to re-educate. You will need to build, and that will become the norm. So that you will kind of build a whole kind of history of education, and you will continue to build until you're in your 80s. So you'll still fresh and relevant, right? We haven't gotten there yet, but for young people, this is one of the things I often talk with them about is preparing for this reality. And for them, the young people today, they will not be able to retire unless they get rich, right? So most old people today are irrelevant because they are irrelevant. They've not learned how to reach the level of wisdom. So they've nothing to offer because, of course, young people can run faster and do things faster. And, you know, unless they can offer wisdom, that's always been the responsibility of older people. The elders in any civilization, any community, any culture, they've always been kind of carrying the wisdom. They've always been able to mirror and then amplify kind of the sense of direction for the young generation when they have all their energy and ideas to try to funnel themselves in the most productive way. Old people today, they're not there, but we can still change that. And we will see over the next 10 to 20 years that more and more old people will jump into more education. They will take courses and classes and gradually become relevant, and they will stay in the workforce, but in a different capacity.
Yes, we have a question in the audience.
Yes, and there is one thing about older people today that, in my experience, is that because of the degenerative diseases in the brain, we have, due to pollution and accumulation of pollution in the body, and also from lifestyle and diet, and also self-pollution. For example, I can take my own father as an example. He's very wise, been in different cultures, and is a very smart man, but due to pollution, both self and from outer influences, he's not where he should have been, in my opinion, but he's still contributing to his community and signing up for stuff to do, and could really be a big asset if with the right care. So I was thinking, because today we don't acknowledge the fact that pollution and the degeneration of our body is a fact, and it doesn't have to be like that, does it? There is a lot we can do there.
But it's interesting because people are not smart enough. Like, one of the big mistakes we've made in our civilization is believing that people are smart enough to make their own decisions about life. They are not. Because we still have the same genes we had several 100,000 years ago. And we make decisions based on our impulses and instincts. And basically when it comes to food, for instance, the only impulse we truly have is to eat, right? And we're drawn, as we know, to fat and sugar and all of that. It doesn't matter how much we understand intellectually, right? We eat based on our genetics. We eat based on very deep instincts. So we can know all of that, but in our brains that will not have a very high priority. Because look, sugar and fat, right? And when it comes to pollution, it's the same thing. It was not a thing back then. So in our brains, it will be still said, yeah. It's just like when it comes to fear, right? We have fear of heights, but not speed. right? So, which of course is stupid. And for instance, in this part of the world, like in Northern Europe, people may have an intense fear of spiders, for instance. No one gets killed from spiders up here because they're not venomous and they're harmless, right? No fear of speed or other things, right? Because that's not part of our genetics. So it means intellectually we can understand that speed can kill you and many people die. But no, we do not respond to that information because it's not part of our genetic programming yet. So when it comes to how we live, our priorities when it comes to food, we still live 200,000 years ago. And it doesn't matter how much information we're given, we're not capable as individuals to make other choices. It takes a lot of work, as we all know, a lot of discipline, a lot of self-growth work to be able to make better choices. This is why we have to work together as a society to create better frameworks, to create incentives. Because left to our own devices, we will, eat ourselves to death. We will poison ourselves to death. We will do so many things that will kill us unless we are stopped by making it illegal, right? It's just how it is. We're not smart enough. At the end of the day, we're completely governed by our DNA. It's just how it is. And it takes awakening for someone to move past that. And so in general, people are not smart enough. So also, as we talked about, we have basically built a civilization that is trying to trigger all these kind of primitive sides as much as possible, because that's why we buy stuff. And corporations have always been allowed to get away with stuff. And remember, what they get away with are stuff we're not genetically programmed to react to, right? So corporations can flood the whole planet with poison. And because that was not a thing way back then, we have no reaction to it, right? And yet we just want to see little kittens on YouTube, right? Because cute, right? And we can spend our time doing that. And we can get very, very concerned about a product having new packaging, right? Because we like the old one, right? But if the packaging contains chemicals, we are not smart enough. People think they are because we are supposed to believe we are smart. So we go out in the world and represent our DNA, and we fight to the death, right? And then the ones who survive, they will carry on. So when it comes to the complexity of life today, we're not equipped to make smart decisions, right? So that's why, and it's kind of funny, right? But where we are at this point in human history, it's also scary. So we need adults in the room. And after the Second World War, for profit, we let the kids take over. So there are no adults left. And now we have an older generation who were never taught by older people how to be adults, right? So we're also now seeing a wave, as you're all aware of, where more classic values are kind of resurfacing. There are more discussions among young people about true values and all of that. So it's slowly changing, but we've lost wisdom and kind of a real adult oversight. And again, when people have been trained to be mindless, selfish, production units and consumers, now they are getting old. And then that's all they can offer, right? So, yeah, those of you who are adults at this point, you need to prepare for something else. And we'll talk more about this because this is where it gets interesting.
Yes, we have a question from Germany where some people do try to take responsibility and be more adult, and especially in the realm of caring for our elders. And she wonders, how often, what's the reality? How often do people in the caring position kind of exhaust themselves or stretch too far? She wonders, do they end up sacrificing themselves and their own health to prevent family members, for example, going into a nursing home? And is that strategy a dead end, or is there some kind of light at the end of the tunnel in the realm of caring for our elders?
Yes, back to how we have a tendency to look at the future based on our current reality, right? Now, robots will change everything. AI will change everything. Like how we look at health will change everything. I'll just explain this to you because being old in the future will be fun. Now, in a couple of decades, people will start having home robots. Right? It's basically take over for your gadgets. It will be all your gadgets turning into a person. And think of, I've talked about, how kitchens have changed, right? When you look back a few decades, what the kitchen was, it was basically the same thing as it was like 50 years before that. Now it's open, it's changed. It has a different function, right? It's the social kind of gathering place for the whole family, and we have machines and this or that, and it's become a place where we can express ourselves and we can hang out, all of that. Now, the next big change in how we live will be the bathrooms. The bathrooms will gradually turn into a health room. And just like the kitchen having multi-purpose, functions, the health room will be bigger and it will be like a home spa / hospital. Your robot will be your doctor, will also be your dentist, will be your hairdresser, will be your psychiatrist, and your surgeon, among other things. And you'll be doing all of that from home. And in your home health room, you will have machines, you will have different kind of strategies to keep you healthy. So, being old in the future is not just that we will keep people alive, half senile and in diapers for as long as possible. Getting old will stop. Already now, when it comes to anti-aging, there have been major breakthroughs in medicine. As many of you are aware of, they've been able now for years to reverse the age in mice. Right? But they're not allowed to perform human trials yet. But they have found the kind of codes. So it's fully possible today to actively reverse aging in humans. Not through diet, not through all of these, very kind of expensive strategies. And there are people that are experimenting with anti-aging in many different ways, but they've found ways to basically reverse it. You can take a pill and your aging will stop. We've already reached that level. And different types of medicine, they're moving forward, and the next big frontier is DNA editing and all of that. So within this century, people can live forever, right? So you can be 100 and look younger than you do now. That will be the reality. This is why we will have fewer people who live longer. So then, when you can have a vibrant, wonderful life, and you want just to kind of live and you're healthy and you have your kind of robots and machines that will take care of you, being old will be wonderful. And then degeneration will basically stop, right? But the thing is, today we have half of the world's corporations are doing everything they can to kill us and make us sick and feed off of our misery. And they're doing everything they can to keep us miserable, because then we will consume. And then you have the other half making money off of fixing us just enough so that we can keep buying the stuff that will make us sick. And then we poison the planet and do like all of that because we've left leadership to young people and people who did not ever learn to think from wisdom and from responsibility. And now they are old, middle-aged and old, and they're still in that mindset, right? So this will change, right? But with the dawn of AI and robots and where medicine is going, the human journey will change radically. So think of, as we get older, we say, well, you know, I would never go back, right? Because I'm more myself, I'm more at ease, I'm more comfortable, I understand things. I would never go back to being young. But I wouldn't mind that, you know, body. That will be the future of aging, right? So right now, the kind of young adults now is the last generation that will get old. You know, and it can be difficult to really grasp what type of revolution this is. Because when we can basically live forever, the problem is how to get rid of people, right? So when we'll look at strategies for that, but how we relate to aging and health within the next few decades, hospitals will not exist. Most services you get like in institutions will be gone because it will all be performed by your house robot, right? And you will have so many health preventive measures that will not get sick in the first place, right? So, and therefore people will not get like senile and old and sit there in diapers. That will not be a thing. They will live at home and live their best life. So everything we see around health and care for the elderly, that will disappear completely. And it will happen fast. It will happen within the century. Isn't that fun? The only thing is, you will not be part of it. Too bad, but you know, getting old will still get better and better and better and better, right? But we're moving in a direction that is really exciting. And just think of also, you know, when you have your like home robot, it can basically do everything, right? Because it will be connected, it will always be updated, so it has the latest techniques and everything you need. It will be your beautician, your housekeeper, your surgeon, like all of that. And we'll just be sure. Think of how we relate to our gadgets today and apps, right? So before apps, we couldn't imagine what that would be like. Now we have gadgets and we have like apps for everything. Think of a person, an app being skill sets. It will change human lives completely. And being old will be just more fun than ever because you will have knowledge and wisdom and experience, right? So that's what we can look forward to if we come back.
All right, we have a question in the audience.
So we are not there yet, so we have home robots and wellness rooms, but there is an increasing interest for longevity and the way of utilizing health ways of living and taking products and all of that. And it seems like the ones that are most interested in it is the people that are more awake already. So it seems like, are they kind of also part of the ones that push the development towards the future scenario that you are explaining?
Yes, because you have a whole bunch of old people that are simply dying slowly, right? They belong to the kind of like old way of being old. That's fine, but they're uninteresting from a more systemic point of view. But we are seeing a change, yes, in adults that are taking care of themselves and kind of slowly getting older, but they don't want to become old. And it's not necessary. And there's so many things we can do. And yes, they're pushing that whole industry because longevity and health will over time become the most important industry in the world, right? Look at the beauty industry, for instance. Look at, for instance, what you can do at home, right? With machines, with different beauty products, and how that industry has exploded. Or like just over the last 10 years. It's a whole different thing, and you can get results at home that you would, like, you had to go to a professional. And now you can do a lot of things at home. So when you look at the beauty industry and the nutraceutical industry, which is then, also figuring out what can we eat to improve this or that, and information is spreading, and you can buy so many supplements now that actually work. It's just like when we go back 20 years, right? When you bought skincare, it doesn't work. It's just a cream, right? Now they're full of different ingredients that actually work, and one knows exactly how they work, and you can use this serum and this blah, blah, blah combined with that thing, and they work. So when it comes to nutrition and supplements, it's the same thing. And now, even medical doctors are starting to take more and more of these supplements. And they used to be very conservative. No, this is just like, superstition. And now more and more medical professionals, because they're kind of also reading up, they understand that what's happening is amazing. So many are taking substances that have proven to reverse aging or, improve overall health. So it's really happening, and it's happening fast. So I advise everyone to do your kind of research and to take supplements, look at your diet, and have different strategies. And we'll get back to that because I have a list of things you can do and that you should be looking into. Remember that we need to look at today, even, as adults today, over the next 20 years, we will see governments increasing the age of retirement all over the world. So we'll have to work more and more and more, and we can't then be old and irrelevant, right? So it's basically 50 years forever, right? For many, when you hit 50, that's when you become yourself, right? That's when you start feeling comfortable in yourself and you start understanding what life is about. And it's like 50 forever. And you can be. And it's about then stopping degeneration in your body, stopping degeneration in your brain, and then go into a different phase of life where you also become wise. And that's fully possible. Everyone can do this, but those people will be the winners. When we go like 20, 30 years from now, they will dominate. The world is changing. Again, older people will be valuable because of their wisdom, because of their ability to think long term, to see bigger pictures, and to work more strategically. Right? So it's understanding that, yes, to do productive work, no, it's not. Younger people are faster, but to be smarter. Because the interesting thing is, although things are moving faster, right, you need a more steady hand on the wheel, if you understand what I mean, right? You can be less distracted. Young people are so easily distracted. As you get older, you know what's important. So you can also see through the fluff, right? I've often compared that to the fashion industry. Like young people, whenever they experience something in fashion, they think it's the first time, right? When you're past 50 or 60, you've seen it like come around like 3 to 4 times and you recognize it. And so, yeah, blah, blah, you know. So you are not as fashion sensitive and you develop style, right? Style is understanding fashion and you use it to express yourself, right? And you have items that may be 40, 50 years old, they come back and they're trendy and you know how to do that. That's wisdom, right? So it's the same thing. As things move more quickly, also in the fashion industry, right? Having people who've been around the block several times and say, oh, this is coming back, they know, they recognize it, and they're not distracted, right? For each round, they're able to see what will stay, what's classic, what's not, what's garbage, you know? And it's that. So as the world is moving forward faster, having mature people in the driver's seat will ensure that you have that steady focus, that you're not distracted, that you're able to see what is quality and what's garbage.
All right, we have a question in the audience.
Yeah, on the flip side, and as a curiosity, the human body in all its glory and nature, in its without the toxicity and the medicine and everything, how old was the human body designed to be able to become?
If a human body is, like, there are so many factors here, right? But if you lived the most kind of perfect life possible for the human body, I would say around 140 years old. But that requires no stress, high level of consciousness, optimal food, like all of that. So that's a life that nobody's living. But the human body can normally get to around 140. With modern medicine, we're talking about, if we want to, we will see people that will probably reach more than 1,000 years. And rich people, you know, so you can have these, I'm not sure if it will be wonderful or a fucking nightmare, but very soon, like within this century, one will have medical treatments that can basically keep people alive forever. And most people will not be allowed to, but rich people can do whatever they want. So you can then, you know, have people behind the scenes who may be several hundred years old, right? Really pulling the string. So think of conspiracy theories today and think of that, right? So that will be fun. Because, of course, what will happen is that euthanasia will be a thing, right? Because at some point, this will become available to everyone, in theory. And the thing is rather how to get rid of people. Because you can't have like a population of down to 1 billion people, but they're all 5,000 years old. It's not smart. So euthanasia will become the normal way to end a lifetime. And what will most likely happen is that everyone, once they're born, will have a date, and it can actually be encoded in one's DNA. So there will basically be an expiry date. So you will be in perfect health, absolute perfect health, and then at a kind of programmed moment, it's done. And people will see that, oh, that's much better. And you can prepare for it. Well, you will have a wonderful life, and then it's over. So that will become normal instead of now. People see it as random, right? A lot of suffering, a lot of illness, and then it's predictable. right? So the way we think around this will change. But as anti-aging is moving forward, so will euthanasia. So kind of balance itself out. But the reason for euthanasia will be different than today, because it's now, of course, because people have lethal illnesses, whatever. When that does not exist, it's simply because it's their time. Remember also, within the next 30 years or so, one will most likely have developed an understanding of the brain and develop like medication to such an extent that like there will be no mental illness or emotional illness. Everything will be taken care of. Cancer will be gone. Like everything we think of today as illness and degeneration will be gone, right? So euthanasia will not only be accepted, it will be necessary. Otherwise, we can't get rid of people. And it will be wonderful, right? It's just, it will be predictable and everyone can plan so that when they know that they're approaching their time, it can be celebrated, it will be wonderful. And then, well, yeah, I've lived, now it's my time, right? So by the end of the century, that will be the norm. These things will happen very quickly once we're kind of past this hump that we're currently in, but we'll get there, you know. Mm-hmm.
All right, so we have quite a nice reflection from YouTube. As a man quickly approaching age 70, one of the things I notice among many, if not most of my peers, is that they slowly start to just give up. They quit being curious, quit asking technical questions, stop being inquisitive about new ways of doing things, start repeating the same routines and practices, and they quickly grow more dependent on help from others. There is a saying that you don't stop playing when you grow old when you stop playing. One of the most compelling things about studying with you, IKYA, is that there's a constant push to keep learning, to keep exploring. And for me, the last 5 years has been a challenge to continue to expand and grow each and every day. And I'd love to hear your challenge to us old-timers this evening.
Yes, I often say that what we can notice in someone when they start getting old for real is when they start living in the past. When they talk more about what they have done than what they're going to do. That's when it's happening in the brain. Because then there is no point, right? Then we're not living anymore. Then we're gradually just living in our memories. And then it's over. So it's a sign that then it's downhill from there. And we should always live in the now and live in what we haven't done yet. Remember that the journey is never over, right? We go in and out of bodies, but the journey is never over. But it's also back to what we talked about, this extremely kind of selfishness that we've all been manipulated into because we're not smart enough, right? After the Second World War. So the corporation can make more money. So that means that when we get old, we don't see a point to any of this, right? We don't see it as a journey. Now, what I often talk about is the process of a fermentation. Now, fermentation is going from knowledge to wisdom. Just like when we ferment things, what happens is that there is a process of digestion, basically, from bacteria and all of that, and fungus, to break down the structures, to break down whatever it is, so that all the nutrients become available and sometimes can form new chemical components, right? This is why fermentation is so healthy, right? So it's the same process in us. Once we have filled ourselves with knowledge and we pass 50, the brain is supposed to move into a process of fermentation, right? It's basically combining everything and now letting it be kind of digested based on the greater image, based on understanding true values, based on raising your consciousness, based on saying, wow, everything I've done now, it was like climbing the mountain, but now I've done that. Now it's time to reflect and to ferment. And what happens then is that we understand. We go from knowledge to wisdom. We get an emphasis not on the knowledge, but on the contextual understanding, right? And we build that tapestry in ourselves and our minds, and we say, that is the purpose. That is the second half of the journey, is to take whatever we learn, like place it into context, and then the context become real, right? Because now, instead of just having values, it's lived. You understand. And then knowledge in itself becomes uninteresting. It's seeing the greater lines. And I've talked to so many people, when they get older, they feel closer to history. It's an interesting thing that most people can notice is like when you were a child, right? And when you thought kind of back, like even 10 years, ooh, that was the good old days. 50 years, that was like unimaginable. 100 years, ooh. As you get older, when you look at your time of birth and you go back, if you're 70, and you go back to, your birthday, and you go back 70 years ago, well, that's not long ago. It's just like, because I can remember my childhood. So it's just that far back. And all of a sudden history becomes more alive because, wow, they're just people. And instead of thinking of them as something else, you just, wow, they're just like me. I can start seeing and understanding how they were thinking, what they did, their motivations, because things have not really changed that much. You start to connect with the contextual part of the journey instead of just things happening on the timeline, right? And it's that. So often as we get older, we get more interested in history, right? In politics, it's not just what's going on now. It's like looking at what's happened before, what's really going on, and looking at the bigger picture. So we can go more in depth, and we'll learn other things. This society is obsessed with information. Information means nothing unless you have the contextual part, right? And that's gone. So we need to train ourselves and educate ourselves and understand that our mind operates based on contextual understanding. As I often use as an example, you can never understand an object just by looking at it. You need context. You need to understand, how is this being used? What is this for? Right? Then you can understand. Otherwise, it's just whatever. So information means nothing. This is also why people are so gullible today, because when it comes to information and facts used in politics, for instance, right? They frame it. The context can be manipulated so that you cherry pick the facts that you want to present, and then you frame them in such a way that people will interpret the facts and information in the way that you have designed. Because people just accept it. And then, on the opposite side, they're doing this exact same thing with the same facts. So it looks like completely different worlds. If you have a more contextual mind, you will see through that. You will be able to look at facts, and you will be able to kind of do the analysis yourself. So when you have a generation of older people who never learned how to become wise, it's over. So they will then start moving into dementia. They will start to let go, because knowledge can only be used based on how that knowledge or information is assigned. When you move from knowledge to wisdom, everything is interesting because the context is alive. So use information to understand the context even better, right? And when you look at vibrant older people, that's what they've done. Wise people, this is the process. It's the fermentation. So it goes from knowledge to contextual understanding. So this is what I would advise all of you to do. Educate yourself and be interested and curious, but not necessarily about information itself, because as an older person, you're allowed to think, I don't get this. But you will get the longer lines. You'll get the context, right? You can look at what's being played out historically. Even though you don't understand what young people are doing today, you can still understand why things are happening. You're supposed to be wise, right? You're not supposed to be kind of full of information. Leave that to the young people. But develop wisdom, right? And that takes fermentation. It takes a different approach. And then your brain will revitalize itself, because wisdom takes a greater activation of the brain than when you activate knowledge. Information requires maybe one cell to fire. Wisdom requires that you're using more of your brain at the same time.
All right. So from YouTube, there's a massive technological shift also that we're talking about in concert with this aging, and one of our listeners wonders, for learning purposes, how are young people actually going to learn anything, and maybe especially responsibility, when everything gets automated?
Yes, that is a huge problem, right? Because people in general don't want to think. They don't want to make decisions. They just want things to work. And when humans are allowed to, they will be in their most primitive state possible. You know, and we think, oh, we're better than that. No, we're not. Look at yourself when you are by yourself and nobody's looking. That's when most people are at their most primitive, right? And so when we are allowed to just stimulate whatever we want, we don't want to think, we don't want to deal with things, we don't want problems, we just want things to work. So we want to be mindless, right? Eternal vacation, and things just work. So yes, this is a big challenge for humans as a civilization, that we're actively getting dumber. And it's happening fast, right? And when you look at many people in the public space, they're so dumb and uninformed that if this was 2 generations ago, they would have been protected from themselves, right? And now it's just normal. The sheer stupidity of what people are saying and doing, what politicians are expressing, what business people are talking about, it's embarrassing, right? So stupidity has definitely taken over, and it's up to each and every one of us to then try to do something about it. But as a society, we will gradually figure out that we can't really be this stupid. We can't go on. So, as I mentioned, a couple of weeks ago, where we are now when it comes to AI and all of that, it's just like when we discovered canned food in TV dinners, right? It means that we never have to cook again. Everything will come from a machine, and in several countries, even in this godforsaken country, they built apartment buildings where the apartments had no kitchens, because it would all be made in the basement on a conveyor belt, and it would just be like sent, that was the future. It wasn't, because no. And the opposite has happened, right? Instead of just eating canned food, we could just eat TV dinners and stuff, but that also developed into a whole industry of ready-to-eat food and all of that. But the food industry today is about experiences, right? It's about having turned the kitchen into a place where we are creative and we eat great stuff and we eat food from all over the world, and it's a family thing and friends, it's social. It's become the opposite of eating canned food and pills. We eat our pills, but that's supplements, and that's also become interesting and fascinating, right? It's not instead of food. The whole thing is just opened up. It was the same thing when we got photography. Everybody said that that's the end of art, because who needs someone to make photos of landscapes, you know, and portraits? And the opposite happened. Artists we set them free from having to paint this fucking landscapes and portraits. So they could now explore the feelings of something instead of depicting something accurately, because photography could do that. So now they could paint their feelings about what they're seeing instead, right? This is what we're looking at. So we'll have a phase now where we will be getting so dumb that it's a question of whether we will actually survive, right? When people don't want to think, they have no contextual understanding of anything, and they just push a button and they scream when it's not working. And at some point, we will move on from that. Canned food was fun for a while. And now it's only when you really have to, or as an ingredient, right? It's not your staple. I really hope it's not your staple food. But whatever floats your boat. But we will see the same thing when it comes to automation. At some point, as humans, we will start using creatively to express ourselves. As I talked about, when we all get, you know, mind links and kind of chips, and it will be more like a intelligent neural connection. It will not be a chip, it will be very different, but it means that we can connect with other people. In the next 40 years, we will be able to connect with each other through technology, so we don't have to talk anymore. We might get to a point where we really can stop talking, where language can actually disappear because we don't need it. This is more than 200 years into the future, because everything will be a direct exchange of what's going on inside of us, and that will become the language. So, over time, it will enhance our intelligence. We will become more specific in what we feel and sense, because that will become the language, right? To understand each other, where we can then transfer whole enormous kind of landscapes of information to someone, and that person will be able to interpret. So we can then live in that kind of energy, in that flow and information that will develop our brains to a whole different level. So we will express and think of artificial intelligence giving you super intelligence in all directions. Think of, for instance, the easy way to explain this. Let's say that you want to learn how to play the violin. Okay, and within half a minute you can. Not only that, you're able to connect to the feelings and the structure and the kind of tapestry of emotions and feelings from all the best violinists in history. So you can then feel that and learn how to then find your own emotions in that. And that can then trigger your own nervous system, so you can basically let yourself play the instrument the way someone else has played it. So you can kind of learn through that, right? Technology will enhance the human experience and the human journey way past what we can possibly imagine today. We will get tired of being dumb. And the thing is, the dumbness, wanting technology to do everything for us, and when we integrate it, that will, as a side effect, make us smarter, right? Because we just want things to work and do things, but we will need to feel, we'll need to sense, and then our brains will grow. Then it will become more intelligent. Just like, again, when it comes to food, right? all the different foods people are eating, and that people today know more about food than they used to, right? Because of canned food and TV dinners. And because of the food industry grew, right? So where we are today was not intentional. It happened as a result of the industrialization of food combined with people actually wanting good stuff, right? So we will get there. And think of, as we get older, we know more about what we like. We understand the good stuff. We want more of it. Yeah. And think of them living in that for 50 years, where you know what you want, you could be creative and have fun with it. And that, right? Being human will be so much better in the future. But we're just in a very, very strange place right now where we have to grow out of the old civilization and into the new. So we will first have this roller coaster like downhill where everything is getting dumber and more kind of really stupid and more destructive, and then it will shift.
All right, so an interesting reflection on that from YouTube is most of these technological developments seem actually irrelevant to a truly spiritual civilization. Is there an alternative timeline where we rely on our innate abilities and do not need these external technologies or forms of power?
That's an interesting question, because when we look at what do we mean by a spiritual civilization, we are living in a spiritual civilization. Life is always spiritual. Everything is spiritual. Because the only purpose of anything to exist is to promote life, is to promote karmic work, growth, healing, which means we all have to be confronted by our own karma, right? So it's not like we can have a civilization where, oh, we don't have karma anymore. That's not the purpose of the horizontal worlds. It's to actually grow and deal with our karma. So a real spiritual civilization can still be a very primitive and brutal one. The most spiritual civilization, I would say, is the civilization which caters to the most efficient way of working out karma, right? So that can be eternal war. Right? So let's skip the kind of the Disney spiritual thing, right? Because spiritual work, as we all know, is brutal. It's facing yourself, it's facing your karma, working, learning, healing, growing, right? So when it comes to the level of consciousness in humans, it depends who will incarnate into the life form. Because as a life form evolves, right? The biological level of consciousness will also change, which means that souls, atmas, incarnating will be onto kind of different levels of evolution because there is always a match. That is not a goal in itself for a life form to become more advanced. It's not a goal for flowers to be able to speak. They're flowers. Right? So it's not necessarily better for the human life form to exist in a higher level of consciousness. Only if it's productive for those who incarnate into it. All right? Because that's the point. So when is the human life form the most efficient biological machine for karmic education for those who incarnate into it? Right? That's what we're dealing with. And as this life form also embraces technology and takes control over its own evolution by modifying its DNA and all of that, that's also completely natural when a life form becomes more intelligent. It means that more advanced souls will incarnate as humans. This is also kind of the big shift. As over the next 200 years, as I've been talking about, there will be a shift in what type of Atmas that will incarnate into humans, because the more primitive ones belonging to the kind of current civilization and the current evolution, they will move somewhere else, right? And there's a shift also because if the same evolution level souls incarnate into the humans, this planet will be completely fucked. So when it's now kind of accelerating the evolution in the human life form, also by introducing more souls of higher consciousness, right? It's the same life form, higher consciousness, but that does not mean that it will be more peaceful. It will be more conflict because that triggers more conflict. This is what we're seeing on this planet right now. So the introduction of more individuals of higher consciousness is stirring the pot. More mirroring, more conflict, more resistance, that will have to be worked out. So it's not like in a higher consciousness that it will be peaceful and everyone will love each other. It's the most efficient way to work out karma, right? So the journey on this planet will be a very bumpy one until the new level has been established. It doesn't mean that then everyone will be friends. In very advanced civilizations, there can still be war. There can still be triggering of patterns in karma based on what they collectively are studying. Right? So the human life form is interesting because it has such a spectrum of available biological consciousness based on who incarnates into it. So that will be part of the fun over the next 200 years, especially in this big shift, that you will see a great variation in levels of consciousness, where you will have a lot of people operating more like animals, and you will also have a lot of people operating in higher consciousness and everything in between. So it will be very eclectic. So there will be multiple levels of conflict being worked out at the same time, and that will be messy. But you will at the same time see that there's a kind of steady journey, a steady development. And part of this requires humans to get older, so that the emphasis of being young and stupid is not as strong as it is now. We need to reintroduce wisdom. So that is a natural part of the change. And then being old will have to become something else than it is today. So adults and young adults will have to wake up and plan for a very different and longer life journey.
Yes, we have a question in the audience.
It's so funny to study with you, IKYA, because when I was clear in my questions that I have, you answered them already. So thank you very much for that. And so maybe it's now the chance for me to invite all the audience to the next crystal course, which will start in summertime. And all the information you get with Andy. And still the questions coming back is, I was questioning, for me it's a charming thought to be able to leave this human body to get a new one and to be incarnated in another planet. And when I think of, okay, this human body will be now 1,000 years old, not having any illnesses, how can Atma develop? Because when we have like illnesses or other stuff, it means desperation, it means I have to work out karma, I have to grow. So what is another possibility for Atma to grow? And the other question is, when souls incarnate in a body that is like 1,000 years and can become or live 1,000 years, is it possible for souls to switch bodies and to experience different bodies in one lifetime?
No. Now, back to how do we grow when there is no outer conflicts, no health issues, no all that. You ask a question from a productive, like a perspective of humans being involved in productivity and overcoming obstacles is basically look at an artist, right? The artist's journey never stops. He unfolds and explores and will go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and hopefully produce better and better art. So when we stop working, because that will also, after the century, work will be done. That will be taken over. Everything connected to productivity and basically making this world work will be taken over. And we can spend our time exploring what it means to exist. And there will be different forms of kind of work. As I like often explain, like artists, even influencers, right? They make money off of just being themselves and people liking that. Right? There will be different ways of contributing to the world that is not kind of working at a factory type of thing. So what we will be doing together as people is to develop ourselves and each other and explore. Remember also when we can feel and sense each other. When you, for instance, figure something out, a vibration or energy, you can share that. And other people will be able to co-experience that with you. It's a very different way to be human. It's a very different journey. And that will just become more and more exciting because it's not like we'll reach this level and then innovation will stop, right? It will accelerate. And then, you know, when artificial intelligence begins to take over and reproduce itself, think of like it gets to a point to where innovation means nothing. Because it can go through several thousand years of human innovation in less than a fraction of a second. So it becomes this organic thing where imagination can become reality. And it's living in a very different type of state. And it's exploring that. So we will not stand still. So for many people, getting really old will be interesting. But it's also wonderful to be able to say that, oh, I want to switch bodies now. I've been here for long enough. I want to experience something else. And then you leave. Because obviously, as human consciousness will develop, the understanding of how we exist as consciousness will be common knowledge, as it is in all advanced life forms. So humans will know that they'll live forever. Right? So one can then explore being human, and then when we feel, I've been here for long enough, you know, this is the end of my stay here, then it's a natural time to leave, not because you have to or you get sick, but simply because you want to experience something else. So then I think when we get there, people will stay here for short or long or this or that, and that will be up to each individual, right? Then humans will also be a multi kind of planetary life form. But we'll get there too, so there will be infinite space and all of that. But so the journey, if it's short, long, this or that, will be based on what one experiences as one's journey. And that's will be part of how society or people around you, they will already know this when you enter, right? So again, we're at the cusp of human existence being radically different. And it will be so much better in every possible way. Right now, though, it's, you know, it's a shit show, right? But we will get through it as a life form, right? But I think it's important to kind of look forward and understand that we are turning into something else. Our civilization will turn into something else. We will use technology to become everything we're not and explore ourselves, and we'll have all these opportunities and possibilities that we can't even imagine, and it's only a few generations away.
All right, we have a question on YouTube. So Is there a link between levels of testosterone and aging? Supposedly the average testosterone level in Norway is around 400, and this listener is at 962 and experiences that people don't believe he'll be 40 next year. So that maybe there's something there?
Like hormone levels are definitely a part of aging. And when you look at anti-aging programs, hormone replacement therapies is always the starting point, because hormones are the chemical signals, and you can force cells to behave in a certain way based on what hormones are present. So the typical thing that one will do in hormone replacement therapy is look at the kind of profile of hormones in the body, and basically, adjust the levels based on different supplements. And you can have them injected or this or that. There are companies around the world now that will kind of do this, and they will create your own hormone blend to compensate, right? It can also stimulate your glands. There are many different ways to do this, but in all anti-aging, hormones are just a big thing. So yes, it's a kind of sign on where we are aging-wise, but it's also something we can kind of control. This has become a big thing. There's still, in many countries, they're still quite conservative when it comes to hormone treatment. But it's changing fast. Depending on your body and your glands and all that, normally I would advise people over 40 to start looking into hormone balance, hormone replacement therapy, because it's definitely kind of part of it if you want to slow down aging, yes.
All right, and then we have a parallel question about rapid aging in women, especially in their 30s, in stressful work situations like healthcare and that kind of thing. Is in previous episode we talked about traditional relationships, for example, where women choose to be mothers instead of chasing careers. Stress levels might be different in those situations. Does that have any connection with aging as well?
Stress is one of the biggest factors in degenerative disease and aging. So finding out how to reduce stress is very important, yes. So it doesn't matter what type of stress you're experiencing. Stress is definitely the biggest health risk. And today, people are stressed out of their minds because we're living in a complexity that is completely foreign to our DNA. So we can't deal with it. So most people are stressed all the time. So having kind of strategies to balance that is incredibly important. But then we have meditation and mindfulness and all of that, and really deal with it, but also through diet and supplements and things, you can also help the body to balance some of the effects of stress, because stress is extremely harmful. Yes, and when you have too much, your body will age quicker. If you have too little, you will also die. Because when the body is not challenged, it will also shut down, right? Your immune system will only work when it's being challenged from time to time. Stress is also how the body is kind of triggered into renewal. So this is what we can achieve by fasting, for instance, which is it's such an important strategy when it comes to anti-aging. Intermittent fasting or like full-on fasting, the effects of fasting today is kind of established. It used to be controversial, but I think the consensus is now that it's very healthy, it's important, and I've always been advising people to include fasting as part of their strategies because it does trigger everything in a good way, right? And will also help the body reduce stress and it will up its cell renewal, up its like organ functions, detox, like all of that. So fasting is a way to reduce stress, combined with meditation and other things, and also more alkaline diet, because stress makes the body extremely acidic. And you can also measure the level of aging in the body simply based on how acidic it is, right? So this is today. This is part of the whole anti-aging field. So there's so much information out there. So working with your body and your mind and your brain and all of that from an anti-aging perspective is not difficult anymore. There are so many things that are now established and so many strategies that we can apply easily, and I think we all should.
Okay, maybe more specifically on it, we had a question about the interplay between mental and physical biomarkers and their impact on aging. You referred to meditation. Is there anything more that you'd like to touch on there?
Oh, well, I can just go through, because I made a little kind of list of strategies that are quite important if we want to age, but not to get old. Number one is exercise. Exercise and using your body is important, because everything you don't use will basically die. And when you look at the blue zone areas on the planet, which is basically what scientists have looked at, why do people get old? Why are they older and healthier and happier in those areas? They use their body. So being physically active is important. And it's interesting that in most of these areas of the world, it's like they simply walk a lot. They move, they go up and down hills and stuff. It's not necessarily that they go to the gym, but they use their body in a natural way. So that is very important. It also helps the body to accelerate the kind of chemical processes and how the organs work and how you detox, all of that. So exercise needs to be part of any anti-aging plan. The same is diet. And diet, to me, is many different things, because the mistake many people make when it comes to diets is they do it from fear, right? If we think that everything is poison, everything is dangerous, and then you eat, your diets will be an extension of that fear, and you will not get healthy. We need to have a diet that allows us to embrace life. It allows us to embrace the joy, right? I've used as an example, when you look at the Mediterranean diet, traditionally is looked upon as the healthiest one, because people live longer and they're healthier and blah, 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 and seems to be balanced, and they can eat everything and they're still happy and balanced. And when you take that diet and you place it in a different culture, it doesn't work. Right? So you can see people, for instance, in Northern Europe who love being depressed and to complain and criticize, and life is so difficult. And when you then have the Mediterranean diet, it doesn't work as well. And of course, it's the cultural differences. When you have an area of the world where it's about family, it's about celebration, it's about enjoying life, enjoying food, and living the good life, and all of that, right? Yeah, you have a context, and you're in a different energy, right? You're in a state of love and appreciation with your family, right? Food may be made by your grandma, that kind of thing. And it can't be replicated by just eating the food, right? This is what I mean. Often when we look at diets, we're trying to force ourselves. We're trying to punish ourselves, and that causes stress. So it doesn't matter if your nutrients are like perfect when you're doing it from a place of self-harm, right? then it's healthier to just eat whatever and be happy. So when it comes to diet, we need to have two different thoughts at the same time. It's eating, healthy, and we can start by reducing what we know is harmful and increasing what we know is healthy, and that's not difficult today. It's less processed food, right? More whole foods. So basically, more whole foods, more plant-based. If we just start there, that in itself will improve your diet by almost everything you need. And then enjoy what you eat and eat what you enjoy. Within those changes, try to eat from love and enjoyment and learn the Mediterranean style or whatever they have in the world, where people simply enjoy living, right? Where meals are about that. So again, less processed foods, more whole foods, and more plant-based. Start there. Then it's fasting. Everybody should be fasting. Intermittent fasting has become very popular. You can also fast like one day of the week. Some people do that. You can do it also from time to time. But fasting on a regular basis will have the better kind of results for your body. It will trigger the process in your body so you can force it to behave as if you were younger. That's basically what's happening. So the older you get, the more you get out of fasting. Yet another strategy when it comes to anti-aging is purpose. Having purpose. And that means living and behaving like for something greater than yourself, which we've lost in our part of the world. As we talked about, we've let egotistical, self-centered assholes take over, and that's become the ideal, right? That's the opposite of purpose. Purpose starts where you end, right? So always when we do something beyond ourselves, not as a sacrifice, because that doesn't work, that causes stress. But purpose is wanting to be part of something greater, right? It could be family. For many, it can be church. This is also why religious people are more happy, because often it's a combination of family and church, and that will give you a sense of purpose, right? You're taking part in something greater than you. When you have a family, you can feel that you're willing to die for them and you're willing to live for them, because that's more important, right? As I say often, when we want to find something to die for, it's because we don't have anything to live for. It's more important, therefore, to find something to live for, right? So think of family, church, that feeling, right? And it can be politics as well. It can be your community. It can be your pets. It can be like a lot of things. It can be a passion, right? Maybe you like to paint, It doesn't matter what it is, but we need that passion and we need that sense of purpose that we're doing something beyond our own survival, right? So that's also one of the markers of people who live longer. And then back to family and friends. Having family, having friends. And today, I often say that the family we choose is more important than the one we were born into. We need other people, we need other beings, we need to connect. We need to live in connectedness, right? I often say that it's in the connectedness that we actually exist, because just like in our brains, when we connect with things, that's how the brain gets activated. We get activated in the connectedness with others. So we need that. It doesn't matter what it is, but we need to kind of experience connectedness actively. That will make us more alive. And we will experience love and sharing and also purpose, right? So that's also a thing one has seen with people who live longer. And also, keep learning, keep studying, but over time, change your focus. You don't need the details, you need the bigger picture. As the brain gets older, you will kind of lose track of details, right? Often you can't remember things anymore. It will melt into the contextual understanding because your brain will emphasize the context more than detail. So that is part of it. So keep studying and learning and make life interesting. Like everything is interesting when you see it in the bigger picture. So challenge yourself and challenge your brain. Another thing that one can see with people who live longer is that they're more grateful. They have the ability to feel gratitude, and often they focus on that every day. Right? It's count your blessings. Look at what you've got. Be grateful. Be truly grateful for everything. And people who are able to feel and sense gratitude in their lives every day, they feel less stress. They feel less anxiety. They feel more connectedness. They are kinder to themselves and others. Right? All of this is one weave, right? But gratitude is an attitude and a mindset that you find overall in people all over the world who live longer. Stress, as we already mentioned, as little stress as possible. Stress will kill you. Stress is killing people because it will make you sick, it will give you illnesses. It will contribute to almost every known illness. So if it can reduce stress, and that is also understanding more context. Now, when we feel stress, it's often because we have the feeling that I'm not doing what I'm supposed to. This is not how it's supposed to be. I don't understand this. This should be this way. Why is this? All of that, right? Lack of context. So this is also part of why the stress levels in our civilization has gone up. We experience complexity, but we experience less context. That combination will skyrocket the levels of stress. So again, context, mindfulness and meditation. That is how you get there. You can certainly not get there by reading the news, right? So spiritual work, meditation, mindfulness, all of that will give you more of that contextual understanding, also because the brain will connect to itself. The body will kind of reset. And there are so many studies on this now that this is also an established fact. So if you want to live long, meditate every day. Allow yourself to reset. Allow yourself to connect to what is actually important. It will de-stress you. And that in itself will help you avoid illnesses and live longer. So, all kind of self-growth work is really important. And then, in general, take care of yourself. That means that have that as a focus. If you want your body and your mind and yourself as a person to last long, you need to treat it well. You can't use it up. You need to invest in yourself in whatever way you can. You need to make your life and your body and yourself a very nice place to be. Right? So just as you like to have a nice home, you need to have a nice you. Right? So take care of yourself. And that also shows in what you look like, what you see in the mirror, how you feel about yourself, what you do to yourself, again, how you eat, if you allow yourself to have fun, it's an investment. It doesn't just happen. So everything connected to self-worth issues, work them out. That's also a thing. Whereas see, when people live longer, they do not have self-worth issues. They feel connectedness. They have the experience of being loved by others, right? Because they are in connectedness. Connectedness is the experience of giving and receiving along at the same time, right? So that is a big part of taking care of yourself. And also think long term. Like if you're young, you need to start planning for a life where you never stop working. And that should be exciting. That you can always unfold, always learn, always grow, and become better and better and better and better. That you will never ever become irrelevant. That your goal should be to become more relevant to yourself, the people around you, and the world for every year. Right? So you should always move forward and upwards. Right? That should be a goal, and we can totally do that. And then balance, which is also a thing. Like people who live longer, they have a great balance. They're not extremists. They find the balance between these different strategies naturally. And therefore they enjoy life. Right? They find that kind of sweet spot between everything that is important. So that is what you can do too. All these strategies are something you can do. But do not be an extremist. Try to find a balance between everything you need, everything you also want to do to invest in yourself and to build yourself and think that you should live until you're 100. And young people today can actually expect to live until they're 100 or more. Right? So we're already there. Right? So we therefore need to take care of ourselves and learn to, look at the whole human journey as valuable. I find it interesting that when, for instance, Biden has become the poster boy of ageism, right? Because he's been criticized for being old. And again, my answer is like being young is not a skill. How would him being younger be better? Because attacking people for being old has become a thing, right? And ageism comes from what we've been talking about, what happened after the Second World War. But also genetically, think when you're young, the older people are established. They hold kind of reality and truth based on their experience. And you're supposed to what one they have. They're supposed to look at older people and say, I want your job. Right? And I'm going to do it better than you are, so out of my fucking way. Right? We're supposed to have that attitude. So old people represent a threat to the ambitious. And that's why it's also part of our kind of biological collective body, right? But that's one aspect of it. The thing is, like, also when it comes to Biden, I find the whole thing interesting because it's not like when he's having a senior moment that he will sit by himself and like produce executive orders, and just like, when it comes to decision making, before he can make a decision, normally there are thousands of people involved. First you have the reports and you have the, intelligence and information gathering, and then you have people analyzing and writing reports, and then you have those leaders coming together and discussing and analyzing this or that, going through different types of processes, and then they come together and discuss for a long time, maybe over months, and back and forth of this or that. So when the president lands on a decision, it's already been going through a very long process with a lot of people, trying to kind of distill, what is actually essential. And even in the process, if you think of that can take hundreds of hours, if he has like 10 minutes of senior moments, it's not when he will be making the decision. And the decision will be a kind of collective process, right? But he has the wisdom, he has experience. It's been in his kind of business his entire life. He knows people. He has connections. is not from a political standpoint, just like looking at him as a person, right? So he has been active his entire life. And he was known earlier to be the best networker in Washington. He knew everybody, and everybody was his friend. He knew how to build good relationships with anyone across the aisle and in other countries. So he's able to get things done because he knows people. He can take a phone call. He still has a lot of friends around the world, right? And it's that. Of course he will fall off the bike. Of course he will get his words and thoughts mixed up. So what? That's part of being old, right? And we need to learn to see past that. Because if we were to judge young people by their behaviors, we would all imprison them. Young people do stupid shit all the time. They do dangerous things. They make dangerous, irresponsible decisions on a daily basis, and we let them get away with it because they're young. But old people, right, if they get their words mixed up or their thought mixed up, all of a sudden it's a big problem. Older people are wise enough to also normally reflect and understand, you know, when they are in a reduced capacity. Young people may be drunk and think that I'm the best ever, you know, and then they make decisions. Look at how many young people make business decisions when they're drunk. Old people will not do that. So it's, you know, we need to normalize being old and not compare them to young people, because that's the problem today. We think that being young is a skill. So when we look at old people, they don't have that. They're irrelevant. They have insight, experience, and wisdom and connections and all of that, right? So I applaud every time he falls off a bike or falls down the stairs, whatever, because we need to do that. It's the same thing as I often say, I hope Madonna keeps taking her clothes off until she's 90. Because we need to normalize being old and her getting old the way she wants to. You know, she is probably living half her life with a plastic surgeon at this point, but that's her journey. You know, and for people saying, like young people say, it's disgusting that she's presenting herself as a sexual individual. Well, do you expect that people stop having sex when they're 40 and live for 60 years without being sexual? Old people have more sex than young people. That's a fact. Right? We're sexual beings. Again, we need to normalize being old and not compare it to being young. And this will change because we're getting older. And over time, this generation of adults at this point will not have it. And people like Madonna is, you know, being a figurehead and basically behaving the way people will be behaving a generation from now. So we should applaud her for every garment she pulls off, you know? And the same thing for Biden. Age is not a problem, it's a strength. Young people can be hired, right? Wisdom is not something you get with money. You need age, right? So we need to encourage older people to get better at what they do and to contribute, because also once you get older, something happens in the brain. When you're young, it's all about you. It's supposed to be about you. You're supposed to believe in yourself so you can go out there and fight for your DNA, right? Once you've like won the war or lost or killed or whatever, if you survive, then based on that level, you establish your family, right? Then you kind of establish yourself and that becomes who you are. After a while, and you've done that, you're supposed to grow out of self-centeredness, because now you've done it. You have nothing to prove. Now you can zoom out to look at the greater picture. Look at what's really going on here, beyond my self-interest. And then become more important to you to contribute to society or the people around you, to your family. So that ego you have as a young person is supposed to be gone. Many people experience this in their 50s, that gradually they're less interested in themselves and they get more interested in what is going on? You know, how can they assist others? They begin finding other people interesting. They begin finding like true values in life, right? So as we get older, we're supposed to become wiser, to pan out, be less limited by our own egos, so we can actually contribute in a way where we don't get in the way of it, right? Then we have wisdom that can be applied and then assist the younger people in finding their way. We need adults in the room. We need to reintroduce wisdom as a thing in our civilization because it's completely gone. So if you're an adult, if you're older, try to stimulate your own fermentation process. Make wisdom a goal. Try to communicate from wisdom. If you're old, do not compete with young people when it comes to knowledge. Remember, they don't have experience. They don't have the context. You do. You need to specialize in contextual understanding so you can see through where someone is at, what they're saying, and place it in a bigger picture and then explain the bigger picture, right? That is how you become relevant as an older person, right? So if we want to reintroduce wisdom, we have a job to do. We need to aim for it. We need to develop it in ourselves, and we need to then offer that to the world, offer that to other people, so they can use that kind of fabric to find their own way, to understand what the fuck is going on in the world and how they can relate to it in a more productive way. So look at older people differently. Now look at that we have now, in a way, a lost generation of older people. There are wise people, sure, but as a society, what happened after the Second World War has basically made older people irrelevant. Choose a different path, right? And we need to talk with each other and other people about the role that older people need to take. We need adults in the room. The future of the civilization depends on it. And it's wisdom. It's that fermentation where you actively begin to understand yourself, what life is truly about, right? To have true values and to make decisions from that, not from greed, not from your ego, right? And it should be a lifelong aspiration to first, go out in the world, be ambitious, then establish your life based on what you have achieved. Then the last part of your life is giving back. We need more people who give back, right? Who can guide, who can be wise, who can be mentors to others. It's completely gone. So you have the opportunity to do something about that. You have the opportunity to become an older person of relevance and wisdom. But to do that, you cannot be senile in diapers. You have to take care of yourself, right? You have to apply strategies today to stay healthy and to even improve your health. Because we're not there yet, as we talked about, where medicine has basically eradicated aging, but there are so many strategies, as we talked about, we can apply that will radically minimize the degenerative sides of aging. So we can be healthy and present, because when we use our voices as older, wiser people, we need to be heard, right? So we need to be strong. We need to have a vital energy. We need to be someone and build a life where we have self-respect and self-love, and we start to reflect that back so people respect us and love us, because then they will listen. You need to show people that you got your shit together, that you're living your values, that you understand what life is about, because people will listen. right? So no matter how old you get, make the commitment to be wise and to be relevant and to be strong. And even now, try to be the adult in the room, starting with yourself and gradually letting that kind of spread. Move out of self-centeredness, move out of the greed and all this, like the self-important stuff of the young. If we want this world to move forward, we need to see the bigger image, right? We need true compassion. We need true empathy. We need true wisdom. And only an older, experienced human can offer that. So invest in yourself. Build. Do the work. Heal. Take care of yourself so that you, for the rest of your life, will be part of transforming this planet and transforming this civilization and point forward to the civilization that is yet to come.
Thank you so much, IKYA. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We clearly have some enormous potentials and significant opportunities ahead and lots of work to do. So let's get out there and do it, and we look forward to seeing you next Monday, 19 o'clock Oslo time, for IKYA Live. Until then, be well.